The first time I saw her, she was measuring our grass with a ruler. Lorna Whitmore, the self-appointed queen of the Maple Creek HOA, 50-something, bleach blonde bob, clipboard fused to her hand like a third limb. She once fined my neighbor for overly aggressive wind chimes. I wish I was kidding. My name's Thatcher. I live with my wife, our 10-year-old son Sawyer, and my 84-year-old grandfather Grady, who fought in 2 wars and still sharpens his own lawnmower blades. We moved here 2 years ago thinking it'd be a peaceful neighborhood. We were wrong. The trouble started last month when our backyard vegetable garden got flagged for non-compliant agricultural activity. I didn't even know that was a thing. Lorna showed up with one of her little HOA patrol goons, Dennis, a wiry guy in cargo shorts and mirrored sunglasses who looked like he failed a mall cop interview. They said the raised beds violated aesthetic standards. Grandpa told them to go plant themselves somewhere else. 2 weeks later, we got a violation notice taped to our window, then another, then a $500 fine. Grandpa ignored them all, said they'd have to drag him out of the garden before he pulled up his tomatoes. Last Friday, I caught Dennis in our backyard. He'd climbed over the 6-foot fence and was photographing our compost bin like it was a crime scene. "Hey," I stormed out the back door so fast I nearly tripped over the rake. "You can't be back here, that's trespassing." Dennis didn't even flinch. Per Section 3.7 of Maple Creek Covenant bylaws, HOA patrol has the right to inspect for compliance. "That's not a real law, you idiot," Grandpa shouted from his folding chair, sipping iced tea like he was on a beach. "You climb my fence again, I'm wiring it." Dennis scoffed and climbed back over. "You've been warned." That night, Grandpa pulled out his old Army field manual, 2 spools of copper wire, and a voltage regulator he claimed came from a decommissioned tank. I thought he was bluffing. The next morning, he handed me a sign written in red marker: "Private property. Fence is electrified. Trespassers will regret it." "Is it actually hot?" I asked. "Low voltage. Just enough to make him think twice," Grandpa muttered, tightening a bolt on what looked like a homemade transformer box. "And legal," I checked. "As long as it's posted and not lethal, we're good." I wasn't sure what crazy circuit he'd rigged under there, but I wasn't about to touch it and find out. Sunday afternoon, I was mowing the front yard when I heard a yelp from the backyard, then a loud crash. I ran around the side of the house and found Dennis on the ground, holding his hand like it had been bitten by a dog. "You psychopaths," he screeched, scrambling to his feet. "What were you doing on my property again?" I said, arms crossed. He opened his mouth, then hesitated. "I was following up on a violation. By climbing the fence again." Grandpa stood behind me now, arms folded, calm as a monk. Dennis's face turned beet red. "Lorna will hear about this. You're all in violation of section. Save it," I said. "I've got the whole thing on camera." Grandpa had installed a trail cam on the fence post. The footage showed Dennis scaling the fence just before getting zapped and tumbling into our bean plants. That evening, Lorna showed up in her Lexus, fake pearls swinging as she stomped to our door. "You assaulted an HOA official," she snapped the second I opened it. "No, Lorna, your HOA stooge trespassed." "Again," I replied. She ignored me and turned to Grandpa, who was cleaning his garden shears on the porch. "You're a menace, Mr. Thatcher. This is a community, not a junkyard." "Then keep your people in their own yards," Grandpa said without looking up. "I'm escalating this to the board," she said. "Good," I replied, "because I'm escalating it to the sheriff." Deputy Cutler showed up just before dinner. He was a big guy with a slow walk and a permanent sunburn around the collar. We'd crossed paths once before, back when someone kept stealing packages off porches, and Grandpa installed motion-activated sprinklers aimed at the mailbox. Cutler had a long memory. "Evening, Wade," he said, tapping the brim of his hat. "Got a call about a potential assault with a hazardous device." I stepped aside. "Come on in." He didn't say much as we led him through the house and out to the backyard. Grandpa was kneeling by the squash plants, humming something bluesy and clipping dead leaves. Cutler cleared his throat. Grady. Deputy, Grandpa replied, not looking up. You wire this fence? I did. And you post a warning. 4 of them. 1 on each side. Cutler stepped to the post and read the sign, then he looked at the camera. That thing working? Always, Grandpa said. Cutler turned to me. Can I see the footage? I nodded and pulled it up on my phone. He watched silently as Dennis climbed the fence, got zapped mid-straddle and fell flat into the garden. When it ended, Cutler let out a breath through his nose. Looks like trespassing to me. That's what I said, I replied. He turned back to Grandpa. Voltage? 42. Legal limit for non-lethal deterrent per state code. Cutler gave a slow nod. You boys covered your bases. Then why are you here? Grandpa asked, standing up now. Cutler glanced toward the street. Because Lorna filed a report claiming you rigged a trap with intent to harm. Got the county DA breathing down my neck. Wants me to make an appearance, at least. Grandpa dusted off his hands. If she wants to press charges, she should be the one explaining why her stooge was casing my compost bin. Cutler chuckled, but only once. Off the record, I agree. But Lorna's got pull. Her brother-in-law's on the county zoning board. You might want to tread careful. I don't tread, Grandpa said. I dig in. Cutler just shook his head. Keep the footage safe. If this goes sideways, you'll need it. He left without asking for a statement. That told me all I needed to know. The next morning, I found a bright orange sticker slapped across our mailbox. Notice of pending review. There was no explanation. Just a date and a time: Thursday morning, 10 o'clock, when we were expected to appear before the HOA disciplinary committee. I called the number listed and got a voicemail message that sounded like it had been recorded in a closet. I didn't leave a message. Instead, I pulled out the lease agreement, the HOA charter, and Grandpa's favorite, the Community Compliance Handbook. We spent the entire evening cross-referencing bylaws with state property code. Grandpa found 3 contradictions before I'd even finished highlighting the first page. Look at this, he said, jabbing a section with his finger. They're claiming authority to inspect private property without notice, but the state mandates a 72-hour written notification for any non-emergency access. They're counting on people not reading the fine print, I said. They're counting on people being scared, Grandpa replied. They want this house. They'll have to drag me out with a backhoe. I wasn't sure if he was being metaphorical. Wednesday night, we heard hammering out front. I went to the window and nearly broke the blinds trying to get a better look. Unbelievable, I muttered. They're installing a surveillance pole. Grandpa came up behind me and whistled low. That's a directional cam, military grade. Where the hell would they get something like that? He shook his head. That's not HOA money. Someone's dipping into other pockets. I grabbed my phone and started recording. It was Dennis again, bandaged hand, and all installing a narrow pole with a small black dome perched on top, pointed directly at our front yard. The next morning, Grandpa was already in his Sunday suit. He only wore it to weddings and court appearances. I threw on a jacket. Sawyer stayed home from school, not because he had to, but because Grandpa wanted him to see what real grit looks like. The HOA hearing was held in the community center. They'd arranged it like a courtroom, with folding chairs lined up like pews and a long table at the front where Lorna sat like a judge in a bad soap opera. Dennis stood behind her, glowering. I counted 5 other board members, none of whom looked particularly happy to be there. As soon as we sat down, Lorna cleared her throat and launched into it. This disciplinary hearing is to address the use of illegal electrical deterrents on residential property, resulting in bodily harm to an HOA official acting in his duties. I raised my hand. Point of order. That official trespassed. You'll have your turn, she snapped. Grandpa didn't wait. That man climbed my fence without notice, without permission, and without cause. I used a non-lethal deterrent that meets state code. You want to argue intent? Show me the statute. Lorna's jaw twitched. We have photographic evidence that your system was designed to maim. You mean the trail cam footage? I said, pulling out a USB stick. I brought a copy for everyone. One of the board members, a short, bald guy with a nervous tick in his eye, reached out and took it. He plugged it into the laptop and played the clip on the projector. The room went dead silent. When Dennis hit the ground with a muffled yelp, someone in the back coughed to hide a laugh. "I'd like to enter this into evidence," I said. Lorna's eyes narrowed to slits. "This doesn't change the fact that you created a hostile environment." "You mean like installing a surveillance camera aimed at our house without consent?" Grandpa said. That got murmurs. I pulled out the photo I'd taken of the camera install. "This was erected without community vote or notification. Unless your bylaws changed last night, that's a violation." One of the board members leaned over and whispered to another. Lorna raised her voice. "That camera is for neighborhood security." "Then why's it only facing our house?" She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. I pressed on. "And while we're here, why is there no record of the last 3 HOA elections? Where are the meeting minutes? Who authorized the discretionary budget that paid for that camera? That did it." Another board member, a woman with gray streaks in her hair and a tired look in her eyes, stood up. "I move to suspend this hearing until a formal audit can be conducted." Lorna looked like she'd swallowed a lemon. "This is highly irregular." "No," the woman said. "What's irregular is the way you've been running this board like a private fiefdom." She turned to the rest of us. "If anyone else has documents or concerns about the HOA's conduct, bring them forward. We're opening a review." Lorna tried to object again, but the tide had turned. She was ignored. As we walked out, Grandpa paused at the door. "Wade," he said, "you ever hear the term paper trail justice?" "No." He tapped his jacket pocket, where the lease documents stuck out like a loaded briefcase. "Stick with me, kid. We're just getting started." By the following week, the neighborhood buzzed like a hornet's nest. Word about the hearing had spread faster than a yard sale on a cul-de-sac. Some folks started stopping by just to drop off envelopes, photocopies of notices, budget breakdowns, even old newsletters that hadn't matched up with anything filed officially. One guy, Mark from 3 blocks over, brought a manila folder full of receipts showing he'd paid fines for a fence Lorna said violated height restrictions. Only the fence had been there since the subdivision was built. It wasn't just us anymore. Everyone had a story. By Tuesday, Grandpa had converted the garage into what he called the war room. The folding tables were covered in stacks of documents and color-coded folders. He labeled everything with masking tape and a black Sharpie. Every morning, he'd shuffle out there in his slippers, muttering about patterns of abuse and paper nooses. I didn't ask too many questions. I just brought him coffee and made sure he remembered to eat. On Thursday morning, a white SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. 2 men in charcoal suits stepped out and walked up the driveway like they owned the place. They didn't knock. They just stood there until I opened the door. "Wade Thatcher?" the taller one asked. "Yeah, who are you?" Special Investigator Darnell, County Compliance Office. "This is Agent McCune, State Regulatory Affairs. We're following up on a complaint involving misuse of municipal funds tied to the Maple Creek HOA. I blinked. "You're with the state," McCune nodded. "Your name came up in a formal audit request. You available to answer a few questions?" Grandpa appeared in the hallway holding a half-eaten biscuit. "They bring a warrant." Darnell held up a folder. "No warrant required. We're not here to search anything. Just want to know what you know." Grandpa glanced at me. "Let's take this out back." We led them to the patio. Grandpa offered them lawn chairs. They declined. McCune pulled out a small recorder and set it on the table. "We've received multiple reports that the Maple Creek HOA has been collecting and spending funds without lawful authorization, including the installation of surveillance equipment and issuing fines that exceed allowable caps per state housing law," Darnell began. Grandpa leaned forward. "You have any idea how deep this goes?" "That's what we're here to find out," McCune said. "Start wherever you think makes the most sense." So we did. Grandpa walked them through the timeline: Dennis climbing the fence, the bogus fines, the camera poll, the disciplinary hearing. I handed over the footage and every document we'd compiled, including the ones other neighbors had submitted. Darnell flipped through the stack, pausing when he reached a memo signed by Lorna authorizing a disbursement of $12,000 from the Beautification Reserve Fund to an entity labeled MC, Security Solutions. "That name sound familiar to either of you?" McCune asked. I shook my head. Grandpa didn't. Darnell pulled out a tablet and typed, That's odd. This company doesn't exist in the state business registry." McCune looked up. "That's a shell. Somebody's laundering funds." Grandpa tapped the table. "You figure out who's behind it and I'll bet you a bag of seed potatoes it rhymes with Lorna." They asked a few more questions, then packed up and left. Said we'd done more than enough for now. That night I couldn't sleep. It wasn't nerves. It was headlights. They stayed parked across the street for almost 2 hours. No one got out, just sat there, engine idling. Grandpa noticed too. He didn't say anything, just pulled a pair of binoculars from the coat closet and watched from the upstairs window. The next morning, the car was gone. But someone had left something in our mailbox, a white envelope, no postage, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, back off. "This isn't your fight." Grandpa read it, then calmly folded it and dropped it into a Ziploc bag. "That's a felony," he said. "Tampering with mail." Looks like someone's getting nervous. Things escalated fast after that. On Saturday, the community center was locked down. A notice taped to the door said, "Closed for maintenance," but we knew better. That same day, the HOA's website went offline. Every document, every record, every archived newsletter vanished. Thankfully, we'd backed up everything. Sunday morning, a new face came to the door: Detective Erin Morales, City Fraud Unit. She was direct, plain-spoken, and looked like she hadn't taken a weekend off in 5 years. "You filed a complaint with the county, correct?" she asked. "I didn't file anything," Grandpa replied. "But you submitted documents to state compliance," he nodded. "Good. Because we just traced a series of wire transfers from that fake security company to a personal account in the name of Dennis K. Moffat." "Dennis," I said. "The guy who climbed our fence," Morales nodded. "He's not just a patrol officer, he's Lorna's nephew. And according to the bank statements, he's been siphoning HOA funds for over a year. Used fake invoices, shell companies, even billed the HOA for security training that never happened." Grandpa rubbed his chin. "That explains the new truck he's been driving." Morales sighed. "Here's the thing: we need someone willing to testify to the timeline. You've got the clearest documentation. If you're willing, we'll get this in front of a grand jury." Grandpa didn't hesitate. "Tell me when and where." The following week was a blur. We met with prosecutors. Morales gathered statements from neighbors. A forensic accountant combed through the HOA's finances and uncovered even more fraudulent charges: landscaping services billed twice, consulting fees to non-existent firms, thousands spent on electronics that never showed up. Then came the kicker. At the hearing, one of the board members handed over a hard drive she'd taken from the HOA's office before the site was shut down. It contained emails, dozens of them, between Lorna, Dennis, and someone named RC, discussing how to neutralize resistance and leverage compliance through targeted enforcement. RC turned out to be Richard Callies, a contractor who'd been banned from 3 other housing communities for similar schemes. He wasn't a resident. He was a plant, embedded by Lorna to help her turn the HOA into a personal ATM. With state investigators now fully on board, the district attorney filed charges: wire fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy to defraud, and criminal misrepresentation. They arrested Dennis at his condo. Lorna went in quietly 3 days later, escorted out of her house in handcuffs. The trial isn't for a few months, but the damage is done. The judge signed an injunction dissolving the current HOA board and freezing their accounts. An interim committee made up of residents now runs the community, and they've already voted to remove the surveillance camera and refund all improperly issued fines. The fence is still electrified, though. Grandpa insists on keeping it up, just in case. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Maple Creek, Grandpa and I sat on the porch, watching kids ride bikes up and down the street again. No more clipboard patrols, no more threatening letters, just neighbors finally acting like neighbors. "You think it's over?" I asked. Grandpa leaned back, arms behind his head. "No, but the worst of it's behind us, the rest, that's just cleanup." He paused, then gave me a sidelong glance. "Next spring, I'm doubling the size of the garden, might even add a greenhouse," I laughed. "You're not worried about bylaws." "What bylaws?" he said. "We rewrote them." The interim board held their first public forum on a cloudy Thursday evening. Folding chairs were set out in rows on the lawn behind the community center. No one needed convincing to show up. Nearly every household in Maple Creek had someone there, bundled in hoodies or jackets, whispering about subpoenas and audits. A few people brought folding tables with lemonade or cookies, like it was a block party with a legal subplot. Grandpa stood in the back, arms crossed, watching like a hawk. I sat beside him, Sawyer leaning against my shoulder, eyes darting from neighbor to neighbor. He'd never seen the whole street in one place like this before. The new interim chairwoman, Marcia Dillard, the same gray-streaked board member who'd called for the audit, stepped up to the mic. She held a manila folder in one hand and a stack of printed pages in the other. "Thank you all for coming," she said. "We've notified every affected homeowner about the refund process. If you were fined, overcharged, or denied access to records, we are working with the county to reimburse you in full. Expect checks within 60 days. A few people clapped. Others just nodded like they were still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Marcia continued. "We've also initiated a full bylaws overhaul. The current draft eliminates discretionary enforcement, limits board term lengths, and requires all financial decisions over $500 to be approved by a community vote. We'll post the draft online for review next week." A man near the front raised his hand. "What about prosecution? They got arrested, sure, but are they actually going to jail?" Marcia didn't hesitate. "That depends on the court, but we've been cooperating with both the DA and the state attorney. The charges include wire fraud, racketeering, and misuse of public funds. They could be facing serious prison time." That got more reaction. Not applause exactly, but a buzz of quiet satisfaction. After the meeting, a tall man in a brown corduroy jacket walked up to us. He had a leather messenger bag slung over his shoulder and a badge clipped to his belt. He introduced himself as Assistant DA Cullen Mayer. "I've been reviewing your testimony," he said to Grandpa. "You've got quite the paper trail. The kind that makes grand juries sit up straighter." Grandpa gave a small nod. "I just kept records, always have." Mayer looked at me. "You backed him up." "I just helped sort the mess," I said. "No," Mayer replied. "You guys blew the lid off a network that's been operating in 3 counties. We've already opened 2 related investigations. This wasn't just about Maple Creek, it's bigger." That made Grandpa narrow his eyes. How big? Lorna and Dennis weren't acting alone. "We found evidence linking them to a management firm that's been installing proxy board members into HOAs across the state. They set up shell companies, funnel maintenance contracts to themselves, and squash dissent with fake violations. You caught them mid-play." Sawyer tugged my sleeve. "Does that mean other neighborhoods are in trouble too?" Mayer knelt so he was eye level with him. "It means your grandpa just made life a lot harder for some very bad people." As Mayer walked away, Grandpa pulled a notebook from his coat pocket. It was old, spiral-bound, pages yellowed at the edges. He handed it to me without a word. Inside were sketches. Diagrams of our house, the yard, the fence. Notes in tiny, neat handwriting. Voltage calculations, camera angles, even a list of neighbors who'd quietly helped behind the scenes. "You planning a sequel?" I asked. "No," he said. "But I want you to have this, in case someone tries something again. You think they'd be that stupid?" Greed doesn't make people smart, he said. It makes them bold. The next morning, I was sipping coffee on the porch when Marcia stopped by. She had a clipboard, but not the kind that made people cringe. She handed me a form with a smile. We're forming a new advisory council. Folks with level heads. People who don't want power, just fairness. You asking me or him? I tilted my head toward the garden where Grandpa was kneeling with a trowel planting carrots in a perfect grid. Both, she said, but I figured you'd be the one to talk him into it. I laughed. He doesn't take much talking. Just a reason. She nodded. Then give him this. Every homeowner on this street signed a petition asking him to stay involved. They trust him. So do I. Grandpa didn't say anything when I gave him the clipboard, just grunted, wiped his hands on a rag and signed without looking up. By the weekend, you could feel the difference in the air. Kids were chalking up sidewalks again. Harvey from next door was finally repainting his front steps without worrying about getting fined for non-compliant color tones. The surveillance pole was gone, replaced by a small community bulletin board with handwritten notes about lost cats and babysitting offers. Sawyer rode his bike down the block, waving at people as he passed. Nobody glared. Nobody measured the grass. It felt like the neighborhood we thought we were moving into in the first place. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops, Grandpa and I sat on the back porch. The garden rows were neat and green, the fence still posted with signs but now more as a symbol than a threat. You ever think about what would have happened if Dennis never climbed that fence? I asked. Grandpa took a slow sip from his mug. They would have kept draining people dry, quietly. One fine at a time. So it took a jolt to the butt to wake people up, he chuckled. Sometimes justice needs a little spark. He leaned back and tilted his head toward the stars just beginning to peek out. You know, I was worried when we moved here, thought maybe I'd be the odd man out. Too old, too stubborn, but turns out that's exactly what this place needed. You're not wrong, I said, but I think it needed a team, he nodded once. Well, we make a good one. We sat in silence for a while, the kind that means everything's finally settled. Behind us, the trail cam's red light blinked once, quietly watching over the garden it had helped save. No one climbed the fence again, not because they couldn't, because now they knew better.